Hey there, welcome to my note sharing. Today on Squaring the Circle. Today we are looking at extreme ownership, how US Navy SEALs lead and win. This book is written by JOCKO WILLINK and LEIF BABIN. How US Navy SEALs lead and win. Written by JOCKO WILLINK and LEIF BABIN. Extreme ownership. Leadership has been defined in different ways by different people. And somebody has said that leadership is the single most important factor. The single most important factor. For all the definitions, descriptions, and characterization of leadership, there are only two that matters: effective and ineffective leadership. But one thing to look at is that the best leaders are not driven by ego or personal agendas. They are simply focused on the mission and how best to accomplish it. Number two is that the right decisions, even when all seem lost, can snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. In part 1 of this book, we'll be looking at Winning the War Within, which starts at chapter 1 also. A solid explanation of the burden of command and the deep meaning of responsibility. The leader is truly and ultimately responsible for everything. That is extreme ownership. And the principle here is that on any team, in any organization, all responsibility for success and failure rests with the leader. The leader must own everything in his or her world. The leader must acknowledge mistakes and admit failures, take ownership of them, and develop a plan to win. To exercise extreme ownership means to be loyal to the team and the mission above any individual. In chapter 2 of this book, it talked about no bad teams, only bad leaders. How is it possible that switching a single individual in a team that is only the leader had completely turned around the performance of an entire group? The answer is yes. Leadership is the single greatest factor in any team's performance. When leaders who epitomizes extreme ownership drive their teams to achieve a higher standard of performance, they must recognize that when it comes to standard, as a leader, it is not what you preach, but what you tolerate. Number 2, if you are not winning, you are not making the right decisions. And this brings about the concept of tortured genius. A tortured genius is someone who accepts zero responsibility for mistakes, makes excuses, and blames everyone else for their failings and those of their team. Once a culture of extreme ownership is built into the team at every level, the entire team performs well and performance continues to improve, even when a strong leader is temporarily removed from the team. In chapter 3, he talks about belief. And the principle on belief in this chapter 3 is, in order to convince and inspire others to follow and accomplish a mission, a leader must be a true believer in the mission. Even when the others doubt and question the amount of risk, asking, is it worth it? The leaders must believe in the greater cause. Leadership is not one person leading a team. It is a group of leaders working together up and down the chain of command. In chapter 4, it talked about check the ego, which is checking your ego. Discipline created vigilance and operational readiness, which translated to high performance and success in the battlefield. The principle here is that ego clouds and disrupt everything: the planning process, the ability to take good advice, and the ability to accept constructive criticism. It can even stifle someone's sense of self-preservation. Often, the most difficult ego to deal with is your own. When ego clouds your judgment and prevents us from seeing the world as it is, the ego becomes destructive when personal agendas become more important than the team and the overarching mission success. Performance suffers and failure ensues. Implementing extreme ownership requires checking your ego and operating with a high degree of humility, admitting mistakes, taking ownership, and developing a plan to overcome challenges are integral to a successful team. It is critical that every member of a team grabs how what they do connects with the bigger picture. You are in charge, so the fact that it did not follow procedure is your fault. And you have to believe that because it is true. In part 2 of this book, which you look at the laws of combat, which is chapter 5, cover and move, which focus on utilizing every strength and tactical advantage possible against those ruthless enemy fighters. The most important tactical advantage we have is working as a team, always supporting each other. The principle here is that all elements within the greater team are crucial and must work together to accomplish the mission, mutually supporting one another for that singular purpose. Departments and groups within the team must break down silos, depend on each other, and understands who depends on them. In chapter 6, we talked about simple. Keeping it simple is important. The principle here is that combat, like anything in life, has inherent layers of complexities. Simplifying as much as possible is crucial to success. When plans and orders are too complicated, people may not understand them. And when things go wrong, they inevitably do go wrong, definitely. Complexities compound issues that can spiral out of control into total disasters. Plan and orders must be consummated in a manner that is simple, clear, and concise. Everyone that is part of the mission must know and understand his or her role in the mission and what to do in the event of likely contingencies. As leaders, it does not matter how well you feel you have presented the information or communicated an order, plan, tactics, or strategy. If your team does not get it, you have not kept things simple and you have failed. You must brief to ensure the lowest common denominator on the team understands. It is critical as well that the operating relationship facilitates the ability of the frontline troops to ask questions that clarify when they do not understand the mission or key tasks to be performed. Leaders must ensure this communication and take time to explain so that every member of the team understands. It is critical to keep plans and communication simple. Following this rule is crucial to the success of any team, in any combat, business, or life. But all animals, including humans, need to see the connection between the action and consequence in order to learn or react appropriately. People generally take the path of least resistance. In chapter 7, it talks about prioritize and execute. Even the greatest of battlefield leaders could not handle an array of challenges simultaneously without being overwhelmed. Amid the noise, mayhem, and uncertainty of the outcome, we should practice the ability to remain calm, step back from the situation mentally, assess the scenario, and decide what is to be done and make a call. We should learn to prioritize and execute. This process is not intuitive to most people, but could be learned, built upon, and greatly enhanced through many iterations of training. The principle here is that on the battlefield, countless problems compound in a snowball effect. Every challenge is complex in its own right, each demanding attention. But a leader must remain calm and make the best decisions possible. To do this, SEAL combat leaders utilize, prioritize, and execute. We verbalize this principle with this direction. Relax, look around, make a call. Even the most competent of leaders can be overwhelmed if they try to tackle multiple problems or number of tasks simultaneously. The team will likely fail at each of these tasks. Instead, leaders must determine the highest priority, task, and execute. When overwhelmed, fall back upon this principle: prioritize and execute. A particularly effective means to help prioritize under pressure is to stay at least a step or two ahead of real-time problems. Through careful contingency planning, a leader can anticipate likely challenges that could arise during execution and map out an effective response to those challenges before they happen. Things can go from temporary setback to new reality. In chapter 8, we talked about decentralized command. The proper understanding and utilization of decentralized command takes time and effort to perfect. In principle here, human beings are generally not capable of managing more than 6 to 10 people, particularly when things go sideways and inevitable contingencies arises. No one senior leader can be expected to manage dozens of individuals, much less hundreds. Teams must be broken down to manageable elements of 4 to 5 operators with a clearly designated leader. Those leaders must understand the overall mission and ultimate goal of that mission. The commander's intent, which is junior leaders, must be empowered to make decisions on key tasks necessary to accomplish that mission in the most effective manner possible. Proper decentralized commands require simple, clear, concise orders that can be understood easily by everyone in the channel of command. With clear guidance and established boundaries for decision making, make sure that your subordinate leaders understand they can act independently toward your unified goals. In part 3 of this book, we talked about sustaining, that is sustaining the momentum, what you have gained. In chapter 9, the plan. What is the plan supposed to look like? There are scenarios that stealth is more important than speed, but speed is of essence when the room for speed comes up. So that is still, that is you come in quietly, it is very much important than speed in some moments. So in principle, you should look at what is the mission. Planning begins with the mission analysis. Leaders must identify clear directives for the team. Once they themselves understand the mission, they can implement this knowledge to key leaders and frontline troops tasked with executing the mission. The true test of good brief is not whether the senior officers are impressed. It is whether or not the troops that are going to execute the operation actually understand it. Mission planning played an integral part in our success on the battlefield. The right process mattered. Discipline planning procedures mattered. Without them, we would have never been successful. In chapter 10, it talks about leading up and down the chain of command. The principle for leading down the chain of command is that any good leader is immersed in the planning and execution of tasks, projects, and operations to move the team towards a strategic goal. Such leaders possess insight into bigger picture and why specific tasks needs to be accomplished. And it is paramount that our senior leaders explain to our junior leaders and troops executing the mission how their role contributes to big picture success. I need to understand how to lead up the chain and why it is important. Leadership does not just flow down the chain of command, but up as well. We have to own everything in our world. That is what extreme ownership is all about. We have to write detailed reports that helps them understand what we are doing and why we are making the decisions we are making. The principle in leading up the chain is that if your boss is not making decisions in a timely manner or providing necessary support for you and your team, don't blame the boss. First, blame yourself. Examine what you can do to better convey critical information for decisions to be made and support allocated. Leading up the chain of command requires tactical engagements with the immediate boss or in the military teams or higher headquarters to obtain the decision and support necessary to enable your team to accomplish its mission and ultimate win. To do this, a leader must push situational awareness up the chain of command. Leading up the chain takes savior and skill than leading down the chain. Leading up, the leader must fall back on his or her positional authority. Instead, the subordinate leader must use influence, experience, knowledge, communication, and maintain the highest professionalism. In chapter 11, they talked about decisiveness and uncertainty. Waiting for 100% right and certain solution leads to delay, indecision, and inability to execute. Leader must be prepared to make an educated guess based on previous experience, knowledge of how the enemy operates, likely outcome, and whatever intelligence is available in the immediate moment. This incomplete picture principle is not unique to combat. It applies to virtually every aspect of our individual lives, such as personal healthcare decisions or whether or not to evacuate from the predicted path of major storm. It particularly applies to leadership and decision making in business. While business leaders may not generally face life and death situations, they are certainly under intense pressure. With capital at risk and market influx and competitors actively working to outmaneuver opponents, professional careers and paychecks are at stake. Outcomes are never certain. Successes never guaranteed. Even so, business leaders must be comfortable in the chaos and act decisively amid such uncertainty. In chapter 12, we talked about discipline equals freedom. Discipline starts every day when the first alarm clock goes off in the morning. The moment the alarms goes off is the first test. It sets the tone for the rest of the day. The test is not a complex one. When the alarm goes off, do you get out of bed or do you lie there in comfort and fall back to sleep? If you have been disciplined to get out of bed, you win. You pass the first test. If you are mentally weak for that moment and you let the weaknesses translate to more significant decisions, it's a problem. But if you exercise discipline, that too translates into more substantial elements of your life. Discipline is the difference between the good and the exceptional. Discipline is paramount to ultimate success and victory for any leader and any team. Last and perhaps most important, when things went wrong and the fog of war set in, we fall back on our discipline procedures to carry us through the toughest challenges on the battlefield. The principle here is that just as discipline and freedom are opposing forces that must be balanced, leadership requires finding the equilibrium in the dichotomy of many seemingly contradictory qualities between one extreme and another. The simple recognition of this is one of the most powerful tools a leader has. Leaders must have a competitive spirit, but also be gracious losers. They must drive competition and push themselves and their teams to perform at the highest level. But they never put their own drive for personal success ahead of overall mission success for the greater team. Leaders must act with professionalism and recognize others for their contributions. A leader has nothing to lose and he has everything to lose. A leader has nothing to prove but everything to prove. Thank you for listening and watching. Please click on like or share or subscribe to get new feeds. My name is Olalekan Alimi, a sales leader with years of cognate experience with multinational organizations.